Jack Miller had been taking out the trash for most of his life. It was never the kind of work people noticed, and he preferred it that way. Long before the leather vest, before the motorcycles, before the quiet respect that came with age, Jack learned something simple. The world was loud, but the things that mattered most were often left behind in places no one bothered to look. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, behind the Iron Haven Riders Clubhouse, sunlight slipped through the narrow alley and reflected off the pavement like oil on water. Jack almost missed it. A small black sketchbook sat wedged between a crushed can and a stack of damp cardboard. It looked ordinary, forgotten, the kind of thing the wind or time would finish off by morning. But Jack had survived enough years to know that forgotten things sometimes carried weight. He picked it up, brushed the dust from the cover, and opened it. The first drawing stopped him cold. It was Ryan Cole, one of his brothers, captured with unsettling accuracy. The posture, the old scar near the eye, even the way Ryan leaned into his motorcycle like it was part of his body. But this was no simple portrait. The bike was surrounded by light, not fire that burned, but fire that guarded. Wings rose from Ryan's shoulders, strong and deliberate, not decorative. Above his head was a single word, written carefully, as if the person who drew it had taken their time to get it right. Jack turned the page, then another, and another. Every man from Iron Haven was there. Mark Dawson, steady and watchful. Tyler Brooks, young but serious beyond his years. And finally, Jack himself. The dent in his helmet from a crash years ago was there, drawn exactly as it had been. Nothing was exaggerated, nothing was guessed. Whoever made these drawings knew them, had watched them, had noticed what most people never did. Within minutes, the alley filled with quiet voices. No jokes, no bravado. Just men passing the sketchbook hand to hand, each one feeling the same unease settle in their chest. Emily Carter, who understood art better than anyone there, studied the pages closely. "This isn't random," she said softly. "This is skill, and it's intention." The question hung in the air without needing to be asked. Why them? The answer came from a message sent to someone who knew the neighborhood well. A girl who sat outside the library, always drawing, quiet, foster care. Jack already knew the place. He had seen her before, hoodie pulled tight, sketchbook balanced on her knees, eyes following the world as if she were memorizing it. They found her exactly where she always sat, alone but alert, her arm in a cast covered with tiny drawings of engines, wings, and lines that seemed to repeat themselves like a language only she understood. Jack approached slowly and sat down with space between them. He placed the sketchbook on the bench. He did not demand answers. He did not rush. He simply asked if it belonged to her. She nodded. Her name was Lily Harper. She was 13 years old. She had lived with more families than she could easily remember, and she noticed everything, because noticing was how she stayed safe. She had been watching Iron Haven for weeks, not because she admired them, but because when their engines passed, the world changed. People stepped aside. Trouble stayed quiet. And the person she feared most hated noise, hated attention, hated being seen. So she drew what she wished existed. In the United States, hundreds of thousands of children move through foster care every year, many carrying fear they never learned how to name. Some speak, others draw. Lily was one of the quiet ones, and quiet children often rely on being noticed by the right person at the right time. Jack listened, not as a biker, not as a former soldier, but as someone who finally understood that the sketchbook had never been thrown away. It had been left behind on purpose. Lily did not tell her story all at once. Children who have learned to survive rarely do.
Instead, it came out slowly, in careful pieces, like stepping across thin ice and testing each step before trusting it. She spoke quietly, eyes fixed on the ground, fingers tracing the edge of her cast as if it were an anchor keeping her steady.
There had been a man in her life before, someone her mother trusted, someone who lived in their home for a time. When Lily was younger, she tried to explain to an adult what made her afraid when he was around. The system responded, eventually. The man was removed. He was sentenced. But the memory did not leave with him, and neither did the fear. Now he was scheduled to return to the world outside, soon, too soon. Lily had learned how these things worked. She knew that release dates were public. She knew that names traveled faster than official notices. She also knew that foster placements were meant to be confidential, but confidentiality only worked when no one went looking, and this man, the one she had drawn without wings, had a habit of looking. She had already been moved more than once, not because she caused trouble, but because adults became afraid. Fear has a way of spreading, and when it does, children are often the ones who are asked to carry it somewhere else. Lily did not blame them. She understood that most people wanted to help, but did not know how to sit with danger without flinching. What frightened her most was not what might happen, but the waiting, the uncertainty, the knowledge that if contact occurred, action would follow, but only after, only once something crossed an invisible line. Until then, the rules said to stay quiet, stay alert, and hope for the best. In the United States, protective orders exist for moments like this, but they require evidence, timing, and a process that can feel painfully slow when someone is counting days in their head. Lily had counted them all. She had counted down withdrawings, each line a way to keep the fear from spilling over. Jack Miller listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that silence, when offered with respect, could feel safer than reassurance. Around them, the Iron Haven riders stayed back, present but not pressing in. No one raised their voice. No one promised things they could not guarantee. Instead, Jack asked the questions that mattered. Did anyone else know? Had there been contact? Was she safe where she slept?
Lily hesitated. Then she admitted the truth she had been holding back. She had not told her current foster family everything. Not because they were unkind, but because she was tired of packing her life into bags, tired of being moved for her own protection, tired of feeling like the problem followed her wherever she went. She did not want to disappear again. This was the moment that shifted everything, not because of anger, but because of clarity. Jack understood that danger often thrived in quiet corners, in uncertainty, in people hoping not to be noticed, and Lily had chosen the opposite. She had drawn attention. She had made herself visible in the only way she knew how. The riders talked quietly among themselves, not about confrontation, but about responsibility, about staying within the law, about doing things in a way that protected Lily without creating new harm. They understood that strength was not proven by force, but by restraint and presence. Lily watched them, still unsure. She had asked for loud, but what she received was steadiness, people who did not rush, people who did not turn away. For the first time in a long while, the fear in her chest loosened just enough for her to breathe. The threat was still there, the future was still uncertain, but now it was shared, and that made all the difference. What the Iron Haven riders chose to do next was not dramatic, and it was not reckless. It was deliberate, it was patient, and above all, it was lawful. Jack Miller had seen enough of the world to know that real protection did not come from sudden reactions. It came from preparation, visibility, and the refusal to look away. They began by doing what many people skipped. They documented. They made calls. They asked questions of people who understood the system better than they did. Not to bend the rules, but to follow them closely. Jack made it clear to everyone involved that nothing would be handled in shadows. No shortcuts, no threats, only presence, recorded and visible, the kind that left no room for misunderstanding.
For Lily Harper, this was unfamiliar territory. She had spent years learning how to stay small, how to make herself harder to notice. Now she was being asked to do the opposite, to accept help without apology, to allow others to stand beside her without feeling like she was causing trouble. It was not easy, but it was necessary. The writers did something else that mattered just as much. They gave Lily a role. Not charity, not pity, but purpose. Her drawings were no longer hidden away in a sketchbook. They became designs, ideas, work that carried value. She was not just being protected, she was being seen. As days passed, routines formed. Mornings were quiet, afternoons steady, evenings filled with the low, familiar sounds of engines being tuned and tools being set down. Lily learned that safety was not a single moment, but a rhythm, a pattern of people showing up again and again. Then the call came. It arrived earlier than expected, and it carried the weight Lily had been dreading. The man from her past had been released sooner than scheduled, not by mistake, but by process. Early release was a reality Jack understood well. It was legal. It was unsettling, and it meant that waiting was no longer an option. Lily's fear returned in waves, sharp and immediate. But this time she did not run without direction. She called Jack. Her voice shook, but she spoke clearly. She said where she was. She said what she had seen. She trusted that the words would be enough. Jack did not raise his voice. He did not rush her. He told her to stay where there was light and people. He told her help was already moving. And when he hung up, engines across the county began to answer. The sound came first, low and distant, then closer, layered, unmistakable. Not chaos, but coordination. Riders from Iron Haven and neighboring groups arrived in steady lines, spacing themselves carefully, leaving room for cameras, witnesses, and the law to do its work. No one blocked streets. No one touched anyone. They stood where they were allowed to stand, and they stayed. The presence was unmistakable. When the man approached, he found no darkness to hide in, no silence to exploit. Phones were raised, names were spoken clearly, boundaries were stated calmly. Law enforcement arrived not to break up a fight, but to confirm what had already been documented. A protective order was put into motion. Distance was enforced. Accountability followed. Lily watched from a place of safety, her fears still there, but no longer in control. For the first time, she did not feel like something was happening to her without her consent. She had been part of the decision, part of the response. That night, as engines idled softly and the street returned to normal, Lily opened her sketchbook again. This time, she did not draw wings borrowed from others. She drew her own, not as decoration, but as proof. Proof that protection did not have to be loud to be powerful. It only had to be present. In the weeks that followed, life did not suddenly become perfect. Jack Miller would have been the first to say that real healing never worked that way. But something important had shifted. Lily Harper no longer moved through her days like someone waiting to be told to pack up again. She had a place where her name was known, where her presence mattered, and where safety was built through consistency, not promises. The protective order held. Distance was maintained. The system, slow as it could be, did its part once everything was brought into the open. Fear did not vanish overnight, but it lost its power to control every thought. Lily learned that being safe did not mean forgetting the past. It meant no longer letting the past decide her future. Her drawings began to change. The sharp edges softened, the shadows pulled back. Wings still appeared, but they were different now. They were not symbols of rescue. They were symbols of strength. Strength earned through survival, through trust, and through learning that asking for help was not weakness. The Iron Haven riders returned to their routines. Engines were tuned, coffee was shared. Stories were told the way older men tell them, slowly, with meaning tucked between the lines. But there was something new in the rhythm, awareness, a deeper understanding that being a community meant paying attention, even when it was uncomfortable. Jack watched Lily one afternoon as she worked at a table near the open garage door, sketchbook spread wide, sunlight catching the movement of her hand. She looked steady, focused, present. And Jack realized that protection was never about standing in front of danger forever. It was about standing long enough for someone else to learn how to stand on their own. Across the country, thousands of children move through systems designed to keep them safe, yet many still feel invisible. Not because people do not care, but because noticing takes effort. It requires slowing down, listening, seeing what is being shown instead of waiting to be told. This story is not about motorcycles. It is not about leather vests or loud engines. It is about presence, about what happens when ordinary people decide to stay instead of turning away, about the quiet power of being seen. Lily kept drawing. She drew strength. She drew resilience. She drew futures that did not revolve around fear. And every line she put on paper carried the same message she had been sending since the beginning. I am here. I matter. I am not alone. Jack Miller never called himself a hero. He never would. But sometimes the people who change a life do not arrive with speeches or grand gestures. They arrive with patience, with respect, with the willingness to notice what others walk past. So if you ever find yourself wondering what difference one person can make, remember this: you do not have to fix everything. You do not have to be perfect. You only have to be present when someone quietly asks to be seen. And if this story made you pause even for a moment, consider sharing it. Consider staying alert to the signals around you. Because sometimes the most powerful act of compassion is simply refusing to look away.